Welcome back to Scratching the Surface. My name is Justin, aka Money.
And my name is Cody, aka Junes.
And thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. We're pretty excited to talk about this one. I think definitely some mixed emotions, but we are excited to dive into the first Omen. Both of us going to it in theaters. Cody, you went with Vetter, a regular guest, and I went with my brother, who's also been on the pod, and had a pretty damn good theater experience. I'm not gonna lie. How was the Palm Springs for you?
Oh my God, the Palm Theater and IMAX, beautiful place in Waukee. It's always an insane experience for a moviegoer. And if you're in Iowa, if you are in the central Iowa area around Des Moines, fucking go to the Palms. I don't think there's a theater for sure in Iowa that can outdo it. It's an amazing experience, and the movie itself, really excited to talk about as well because there was so much to unpack. The moment the movie ended, I looked over at Colin and we're both like, what the fuck did we just watch, dude? This was
Yeah,
crazy. And I can appreciate a film like that sometimes. I know there was a bit of it that maybe went a little too far, maybe got a little too fun with it, a little too creative at times, but I can kind of appreciate that at a certain level.
yeah.
And I'm excited to see what your thoughts are, Money. And I really, really don't know where we're gonna lie when it comes to ratings.
I know that I am curious about. We will read Rotten Tomatoes, give our own personal scores at the end, not knowing what we're going to give, so it's all raw. But we did the same thing. My brother and I, we literally looked at each other and we're like, "Are you confused?" And he's like, "Yeah." And we said the same thing, and definitely some good scenes in the movie. I didn't have any expectations going into it. Very, very similar in some ways to Immaculate, which was our last episode. Very good film, by the way. So we'll see how it kind of compares to this, being in that Roman Catholic kind of ritualistic horror genre again, for this time of the year with horror movies coming out. So, June's, you're, you know, obviously you probably don't go in with a lot of expectations sometimes. What were just your general thoughts on this movie, kind of keeping it spoiler free? Obviously, there was an original film to this. It does follow up after. You did say you watched a little bit of it, the first one to prep for this. So what was going through your head a little bit?
Well, when I was reading on the First Omen, Money, I saw that it was the sixth installment in the franchise, and I immediately thought, I'm like, oh, duh, them obviously the Omen franchise. I just never had gotten around to watching any of those. If I'm being frank, I literally hadn't watched a single one of them, so I had no idea of what kind of connection the First Omen would have with the Omen. But there's a certain point in this film where I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can see where the correlation lies and how this is going to tie in going into the end. So
Hmm.
for fans of the Omen franchise, I think this is a really fun one. I think a lot of them are going to eat this shit up, really, because it does tie in really nicely. And overall, look, we've got a lot going on in the past couple of years, especially with Roe v. Wade and having states be able to decide on whether a child should be born or not. And, take whatever side you want. I'm not going to judge people for their opinions. But that is, I think, the exact reason we're seeing movies like Immaculate and we're seeing movies like The First Omen coming out right at this time and in the same year, which is crazy. The fact that we just watched two almost nearly identical films in terms of their story, basically within a month, which
Yeah.
you don't really see very often. And the cast that we have, maybe not as recognizable. Obviously, Sydney Sweeney was a big draw for Immaculate, but there were some recognizable faces that I did have in here that I love seeing, specifically the father that was from the movie The Witch. So we've got a decent cast, and I think everybody came to fucking play here. And I will say, Money, I think they outdid themselves with the setting. There's amazing aerial shots of Rome that are personally better than what we saw in Immaculate. So kudos to the whole team putting together all those shots, making sure every angle of the buildings they had was realistic. And a lot of surprising art was mixed into this film as well. What were your thoughts on all the artistic choices that you see, all the freaking designs of the gods and all the sexual
Yeah.
images on the walls? It was like left and right.
It took place, I think, in what, 1971 or just in the early 70s, this film. So like seeing that makes you think the history just of the church, the religion itself, everything that's brought up to date in this film. And it kind of, there's some teasers in it because we see some of the same art later on in the film when things are ramping up, when things are happening to our main character, things like that. It really makes you appreciate it. And yeah, I like how you brought that up too. I would agree this does have a better kind of cinematography, uh, kudos points to it rather compared to Immaculate, but nonetheless, still pretty damn good from both of them. So we talked a little bit about that. I think we can kind of get into this film and dissect it. But before we do, guys, everyone listening, please show some love and support. We are on Spotify. You can watch our faces, live reactions here on YouTube, full length episodes, as well as Apple Podcasts, and on TikTok, where we post clips almost every day. So be sure to check those out. Comment, like, whatever you want to do, subscribe. It really helps the channel out here and helps keep us motivated a little bit. But nonetheless, we just love doing this. So I love talking horror with you, Junes.
Nothing better, money. I'm excited to talk about this one.
So the First Omen, I will just briefly read the synopsis really quick, just as a little refresher. So when a young American woman is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, she encounters a darkness that causes her to question her own faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring out the birth of evil incarnate. So pretty damn simple, but pretty complex movie, I would say. So anyone that watches, I hope you understand our level of just this compressed feeling. I just have this little bit of weight because, yeah, like you said, there is this franchise, and I'm not that well familiar with it, kind of like you. But doing research and things like that, it did help a little bit, but still, just a lot to unpack with this film. But like we said, it takes place in like the early 1970s, and kind of similar to Immaculate. We have this young girl come into an orphanage, ready to take up the veil, I think, which means just trying to become a nun, in that aspect. So again, a young woman, very similar to Immaculate, but we get introduced to some priests, a cardinal, some other sisters. She's taking a tour. Really, dude, the first half of this movie was pretty damn slow and just drawing out characters, introducing key characters, and just attributes that are going to contribute later to the second half that I noticed, Junes.
The first half, I totally am online with you. It definitely was way different than what we had in the second half.
Yeah.
Completely removed. I felt like I was watching an entirely different movie in the second half, and that's fine. And my one complaint in the first half is sometimes when you try to be artistic with a film, you try to implement, the ominous choir music, some of the artistic imagery on the walls, all that's cool, but it seemed so jolted at times. I felt like we were just going back and forth, and the mood felt very inconsistent. The overall mood felt inconsistent. I wasn't on board with that. I think it was a little bit jolting for the audience. It doesn't take away from it entirely, but that's just a kind of a quarrel I have with it from a directorial standpoint. I think that the location is perfect. I just mentioned that briefly. Everything was on spot for that, and the nuns were good as well. There was a certain level of suspense you had. Okay, do these nuns seem genuine? They seem like nice people. We know as the viewer there's probably more to it. There's probably something going on here. Same with the cardinal that welcomes Margaret into Rome when she arrives. So there's a lot of suspense. We're trying to put the pieces together. A lot of it is explained, but in pretty shitty fashion, if I'm being honest. We as the audience really have to do some research on our end, which is a little frustrating at times. You don't want them to have to freaking have it be right on the nose, telling you everything, but sometimes it's nice to have those things a little more plainly displayed for us, especially if we haven't seen movies from the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, and there were really important scenes too in the first half with especially, Father Brennan played, or Ralph Ineson from The Witch too. But Father Brennan in this film, he really, whenever he was on screen, that you were going to learn something. The dude was so informative. He helped keep me in track of what's really going on in the beginning all the way through to the end. because his dialogue was just purely informative, like what his mission was trying to do for Margaret. Uh, Facts just about Carlita, anything about the church trying to protect her, how he knew her. The scene where he approached her on the steps in Rome, kind of in that courtyard area. Um, all at the same time, it's helping me just really understand this film. So I loved his role. I think he probably had the most important role in this film, in my opinion, almost. Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about the plot, though, Junes, because you know, as we dive into it, we could go down the rabbit hole, but trying to simplify this and keep it, on track is going to help a lot. So we kind of have Margaret who's brought in, and again, she meets all these nuns, other sisters, the cardinal. She gets housed in this orphanage, has jobs, daily things to do, things like that. And we kind of learn a little bit about Carlita, how she's troubled. She's placed in the bad room, things like that, for misbehaving. And Margaret learns a little bit about her presence, her character, and her life, and actually tries to figure out a little bit about her past as well and the pathway that she's been on. All the help from Father Brennan as well. But we have scenes in here where she's very like sadistic almost with drawings. There's another character in here. I think you pronounce it Luz or Louise, or it's one of the characters that ends up like stabbing her in the end, I think, who converts to the dark side, but who we think she's great. I think
Mhm.
that's the same character she goes out and parties with that night. Um, but so all these characters obviously have meaning. But this first half, trying to stick to the first half, obviously, you know, we think they're friends. She's learning. She's trying to have a good time. She's trying to like immerse herself in this culture now. And actually, scenes where she's learning language, being with the kids and whatnot. Um, but the first thing that comes to mind is when her roommate kind of gets her to go out and let loose, dress kind of slutty, if you will. She really, because her body is devoted to God, but she wants it devoted to this night almost, because she's never partied, never drank, never went to a club, whatever. Uh, Literally like locked up, devoted her life to Christ this whole time up until this point. So the first thing that comes to mind is that club scene, which I thought was pretty damn good. It was a totally like, I want to know what you felt too, because it just felt so off having that in there.
It did. It felt really,
Like,
really misplaced. I didn't mind it, but it was
yeah, yeah,
disorienting a little bit. And at a club, when you've been having drinks, you are going to be a little disoriented. So I guess they were on par with what it should look like, but it felt out of place for this film. I didn't mind it. And I think there's with this type of scene, we had the similar moment in Immaculate where the audience is just as confused now as the main character that we're watching, the main protagonist. We don't really know what happens in those moments. All we know is that Margaret gets a little too crazy. She wakes up the next morning just like that. She's back in her
yep,
room, basically asking Luz, "How did I get home?" And Luz just tells her, "I was a good friend. I brought you home. You got a little wild, but
yeah,
here we are." And I think with nuns, this probably is not an uncommon thing. You would want to think that all nuns, all priests, all cardinals are good. Their word is good. They are committed to God 100% fully.
hmm,
But there is a sad truth that there is quite a few of them that they get a little bit, I would say, curious, and they want to just try different things. And it's hard to be so loyal to God all the time. And I think you see that probably with a lot of nuns and a lot of priests. And certainly with
yeah,
Margaret in this film, you can see her wanting to experience more. You can see that there's a longing for that, especially in the scenes with Luz when they go to the club. And she meets a man
yeah,
there. I think his name was Paulo or something like that.
yeah,
And we don't know what happens there. And this gets revealed a little bit, maybe in the beginning of the second half, as to what happened. But we see Paulo in that scene. She supposedly passes out, wakes up the next morning. We don't see Paulo after that. So his scenes were brief, but they did have some weight to them, and that's, like I said, revealed to us a little bit later on.
yeah. The weight of that and the severity of that, what we find out in the end is huge. But yeah, just every night kind of go out, drink, you drink a little too much, you wake up back at home, nothing happened, you're fine, you're just hungover. But yeah, loses character, how she comes back in the end, knowing that now, like, she told her, yeah, I got you home safe. And she's like, I didn't embarrass myself, did I? And she's like, just a little. Knowing, I bring it up because we know that that night had so much significance. Probably one of the most important scenes that we learn about because she was forcefully impregnated. We figure out, and this is tying all into the plot at the same time. Because we were talking before, and we pretty much agreed on how there's this jackal in the film, this monster that we learn about. I think that's also presented us in the first half. That pregnancy scene, fucking crazy. Um, but we'll get to that shortly. But that jackal, did it impregnate her, or was she just forcefully impregnated by something else that we learn about with Margaret's character? She felt fine, so we don't really know till later, till she gets pregnant, gives birth, all that in the end. But that night out had so much significance, and we didn't know the whole time till later on. But knowing that now is just really heavy for us as an audience. But I love that night out, that whole scene, Paulo's character who comes back later. And really after that, it's just kind of, we get more scenes with Carlita, a lot of just different dialogue from characters, maybe another scene from Father Brennan. And this first, like, I'm trying to think of some other substantial points from the first half. I think I said it earlier, but we have that pregnancy scene too, where Margaret, there's a viewing window and we just have that hand coming out of a girl giving birth. Was she hallucinating? Was that the
Oh
jackal?
boy. There's
That's
a
the
lot
big
of
question. You know what I mean? And I think as an audience, we all ask that, especially if you're not as invested and familiar with this franchise. Because to me and my brother looked at each other like, holy shit. Like it had some intense shots and snippets of that hand coming out. And she experiences, I think, just some other hallucinations throughout this film. Like, what were your thoughts on that, Junes?
really good question from the original
Yeah.
Omen. I was reading up that the father at the end of the film goes back to the grave of Damien's supposed mother, and he sees a dead infant child, the remains of it, and then the remains as well of a jackal. So, is it real? Is it not real? The jackal specifically. I can see a world where it does take a physical, actual form
Yeah.
and exists in real life. I can see that being plausible. We've seen it in films before, but I also like the side of it being more mystical and not
Mhm.
actually being there and the humans just believing that they're doing this sacrifice. And I guess the sacrifice does ultimately work, I think, but they do this sacrifice with actual human beings, the both of them, the woman and the man. And there is some kind of ritualistic thing they do that is able to produce this antichrist. So whether you believe it's real or not, I don't think it really is that big of a deal one way or the other. But I
Yeah.
think it's great for our own interpretation to think about. Is it real? Is it not real? We see that claw, like very disgusting scene. I'm just going to say that
Yeah.
with the pregnancy. Those are things that we do not need to see sometimes, honestly, as an audience. And they even were considering, I think they did make this an NC-17 film, which is strictly adults, like literally children are not allowed, 17 and under are not allowed. And I think that was the scene they were talking about specifically that kind of got them labeled with that NC-17 rating, which makes sense because we kind of saw it, and you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And the
Yeah.
audience that's listening also knows what I'm talking about. It's a bit much, but we see an actual claw come out. Is she hallucinating? Is she not? She seemed like she was pretty level-headed in the first half of the film when we saw that moment. So I want to believe that she was maybe actually seeing it, but it's so hard to comprehend that, and it's hard to imagine that being real. Really, really crazy scene. And this goes on, Money, the first half, where she is seeing things. We're getting a little more and more suspicious, a little more leery as we progress through the film. She sees a couple of moments in the bedroom of Carlita where she's being held down and strapped down by the members of the convent of the orphanage. So she knows there's something weird going on here. She isn't sure what exactly yet, but it's something that she certainly tries to figure out on her own. And we kind of go on that ride with her, a crazy ride at that.
Yeah, she's definitely dipping her toes into the water. And I think she's all the way in that pool by the end of the movie, obviously. So she I think she knows what she's kind of getting herself into. Again, all from the help of that father, Brennan. It's just amazing what he did. But kind of going off of what you said earlier too, the devil being the master of all puppets, that big question, is the jackal real or not? Was she seeing the devil? I think, the devil would take on many forms. We see it in a lot of other horror movies and films, a humanesque form or something totally different, a monster in this case in the film. I think it kind of alternates and in a world. I think in this movie we see both. I think we see the real thing come out at the end. I personally believe she was kind of just hallucinating um, with it, with those scenes, the pregnancy scene. There's a scene in the second half. They're out on the streets with that protest, and she's just like, no one's around her, and she feels like she's being strangled. She's definitely hallucinating. I think it's just getting to her head as she's getting more involved with this, trying to help Carlita. We have files, researchers, these priests helping her, all in the second half. So I'll leave it at that. But that I think kind of wraps up the first half. The second half is, you and I would agree, so much better uh, than the first half. So I think we can get into table talk now. Junes, what do we got in store for table talk today?
Yes, sir, Money. Today we will be naming our favorite horror movie poster art. There's a lot of good ones out there, and there's one that I think sticks with all of us more than the others. And I kind of have an idea of where you're going to go, but you might throw me for a loop. So I'm excited to hear what you say.
Yeah, I can go first. You probably know where I'm going to go. I'm definitely biased on this. I have to go with the original 1978 uh, horror movie poster with Michael Myers. It's one of those posters when you see it, you just immediately know and you immediately feel that presence of him with the pumpkin, his hand with the knife. It's all curved like a pumpkin. It's so symmetrical in a way. Being my favorite genre, with slasher, just his presence alone in these films, you see it and you immediately know what you're in for with this kind of franchise. Probably, to mention a couple other ones, the Halloween Curse of Michael Myers one, it's kind of like blue. He again knives in all of these for the most part. But it's just a close up kind of side shot of his face. Just such an eerie presence to this character and in this whole franchise. It's none like, we have other ones. If it really just depends on your genre, I will say. Um, but what really sticks with you is gonna, definitely help your decision in here. But Halloween, the night he came home is just that line alone. It all wraps into it with this kind of franchise. So I think it's incredible how they make these, how they make you feel, and how his presence in every single one of these movies, he always comes back to haunt you on Halloween. So nothing like it. The holiday itself, October, fall, some of my, all of these tie into this poster, so it's just incredible. It's one of my favorite times of the year, obviously. So it's it just brings me back home a little bit, and makes me remember why I got into horror a little bit. So definitely a part of me. It'll have a special place in my heart probably forever. So that's what I got to go with.
That just makes me happy. You just warmed up my heart, Money. That's so cool to hear you talk about. I can tell how much it means to you, and I know there's a lot of people that feel the same way. While I don't have the same love for the franchise as you do, I can absolutely admire this poster art that we had with the
Yeah,
original Halloween. It really does embody the season of fall beautifully. I mean, you think of Halloween, that it is Halloween, man. It's the fucking
it's
season. That poster art is the goddamn season.
it
It
just
embodies everything
yeah.
about it. such a good one to choose. I had a feeling you might go there, and I wasn't sure, but I figured you would, and I loved hearing you talk about it. So for mine money, I did some thinking, and I of course wanted to go with Alien,
Yep.
but I decided I'm doing a little 360 on you. I decided to do Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein, because
Yeah.
I've always been such a fan of the Halloween season, and there is nothing that depicts this season. We just talked about Halloween being probably the epitome of it, but Frankenstein's right goddamn there, and Frankenstein is one of the first goddamn monsters we've had in the horror genre, and his impact is going to last forever. Frankenstein transcends time, honestly, and the original image on the first film, it's such a just a good eerie poster art. It's dark, it's
Yeah.
gothic. You have the full on face of Frankenstein looking demented, looking like he's about to freaking kill somebody, but there's a level of complexity in Frankenstein's face. You see a level of sadness within his eyes as well. I think it's a great piece of poster art that you can look at and interpret. You can see the feelings within Frankenstein, and the gothic aura of the
Hmm.
of the poster art is why I like it so much. And Alien, it was right there. Aliens, nobody can hear you scream in space is so goddamn good, and just the egg that you see in the poster art, it really makes you question what the hell is this film about? Why is this
Yeah.
egg on this picture? There's a lot of just questions to be answered, and that's why you got to watch the movie. It's so good. But I'm going Frankenstein. You should watch it, Money, at some point. It's a great film, and I love talking about these things. So thank you
Yeah.
for leading us into Table Talk, Money.
Yeah. These posters really just remind you why it all started, I think, when you really narrow it down to some of your favorites. As a kid at home under the sheets, watching these movies, growing up to diving into it, appreciating it a little bit more, and then here we are talking about it. So thank you, Junes.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And with the second half here, Money, you mentioned it. It gets crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it ramps up a lot. I don't even know where to start. I think uh a good point I talked about earlier is there's a riot, everyone kind of breaks out from each other, they get separated, and Margaret experiences demonic hallucinations. Again, this movie had some really freaking intense scenes with this monster, the slime all over it, her getting touched in certain ways, and the way it makes you feel as an audience member just creeps you the hell out a little bit. I mean, you got to appreciate it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much at times, but I do appreciate that they are able to go those places and feel like they're not being restrained, because the horror genre is all about pushing the boundaries a little bit. Yes, it's too much at times. Yes, it's a bit
Yeah, yeah.
controversial. People are going to be rubbed the wrong way no matter what you do. But
Hmm.
goddamn, these movies need to exist to tell a story. Somebody that wrote this had a message they were trying to display. Whether you agree with the message or not, who cares? Honestly, who cares sometimes? I agree that it pisses me off when they're putting stuff too on the nose, but I'm okay with it for some films that are overall telling a story that is cohesive enough and has enough intrigue. It's not too on
Yeah,
the nose. I don't like those ones, but this right here, I'm fine with. It's a little bit disturbing.
yeah,
I understand that, but that is what makes the horror genre. And we see those slimy hands, man, that demon like hand. It's touching the body. We see a lot of skin. So this is not for all audiences, clearly, but the second half is crazy, especially because I mentioned we had a lot of jumping back and forth. We had a lot of the ominous choir music. A lot's happening. It's really intense. And then boom, we shoot back to a very relaxed and laid back scene. And we're
yep,
thinking, why the hell are we doing this? Like, be consistent. I don't like how we're doing this back and forth stuff. We see that even more so in the second half. And I don't remember specifically at what point we end up seeing Father Brennan again, because Father Brennan meets up with Margaret at his apartment, or he gives her the address to
yeah,
talk things over. And we see a lot that is revealed in terms of what happened the night she went to the club and who she actually is. She isn't even aware, money, of what significance she plays in this role. She has no idea. And we as
Mhm.
the audience are starting to think, okay, is it really Carlita that is the focus here at this orphanage? Is she really the one with the troubles? Because goddamn, money, we start to see that Margaret might be the one with something inside of her.
Yeah, she definitely is. And we'll probably spend a good few minutes here because they are trying to find these files buried in the orphanage. And we learn that Margaret finds them underground. She sneaks away from Luz's when she's taken up the veil and her vows. She sneaks off, finds the files for Father Brennan. He ordered her to kind of do it before. It's going to help him with his research. He's trying to prove a message to the world and spread it to where what's really going on here to bring people back into the church to expose the Antichrist. There's riots. They mentioned that Margaret's generation is changing the religion in a bad way because you see what these young people can do now in protesting and all that. Great shots again in Rome here in the early 70s with this film. But he's trying to spread a message and expose it to the world, and he has to prove it, and he can't do that without these files. So Margaret does sneak off. She gets them. We get a scene, yeah, back in his apartment again with that other priest who we learn was on their side the whole time. He was an ally, and I believe his name was uh, let's see, Father Gabriel. He was an ally the whole time, which we didn't know. I love that little bit in there too. Um, but I think the way I would put it, there were files all labeled Skinea, however you want to pronounce that. Each file contains a photo of a disfigured baby, and they were trying to find and correlate the marks from the original photo with those three nuns we see in the film holding that baby, and the baby in the photo had a different mark than Carlita. Carlita's was
Mm-hmm.
up under on the roof of her mouth by her gums. And we learned that Paulo, the night at the club, found it. He ends up dying. That's a whole crazy scene, too. He gets hit by that car. Very disturbing. But we learn that Margaret's mark is the same. It's on her head. And that's the same mark on that baby in the original photo. So the tables have turned. Everything kind of breaks out here with this scene. Junes, what so did that make sense to you in theaters as you were watching? Because you're learning this as you go. So I think that was the point for me that I'm like, okay, this is finally kind of starting to make sense because all the this whole time it was Margaret.
It's crazy. It's a crazy
You know what I
moment
mean?
to have. Yeah. And she loses it when she finally figures it out. And we do too.
Yeah.
The 666 on the parts of the on the head or on the roof of the mouth, different spots, that is very creepy. I find that extremely creepy. There's something
Yeah.
about the 666 that just it gives me the creeps, man. And whether intentional or not in society today, when you see people trying to start a cult or following a cult and they get really invested in that shit, it does creep me the hell out. So the 666 is a powerful moment when she notices that it's on her freaking scalp, and she has a little bit of a blackout moment, sort of, when she comes to figure that out. Father Brennan tells her it's okay, let me check it.
Yep.
I probably could have said that in the better voice. Let me check it. So he looks, he moves the hair, and goddamn, it's there. And it's everybody kind of steps back for a second because it's a whoa, wow, did not see that coming. Like, that's a big reveal. What do we do from here? And I
Right.
believe after that they decide to maybe take her to the hospital or something like that. And along the way, they get smacked by a vehicle. Father Brennan is knocked out. The one driver that we see earlier in the film gets killed.
Yep.
Pretty gruesome, actually. She gets out of that car, and I don't know what you think of this scene, money, but
Dude, it
we
was intense.
we talked about Sydney Sweeney killing it and immaculate in that last scene. I fucking think the actress that had this moment as Margaret was was better. I don't. She went berserk, man. She did look like a goddamn demon. How would you explain that moment that she was going through? Would you say it was the devil kind of coming out of her, or was it kind of in her own head? I'm very curious to see what you think because there's a lot to
Yeah.
unpack there.
I think a little bit of both, definitely in her head, but I think she was completely taken over at that point. I mean, you hear the screams, her whole body jolting. There was a little voice over there with that, deep demonic,
Mm-hmm.
like that voice. It's waiting to come out. And her belly's filling up. Like she's literally like well, we learn it's twins, but the twins are growing in her, and her freaking water breaks. There's like blood everywhere.
She wasn't
So
even pregnant in the first half, and just like that,
no.
all of a sudden, I'm like, what is happening?
So I think the car crash initiated that, protecting the children, and that I feel like is why she kind of lived. Like no harm, no foul done to her. She seemed completely fine in that whole wreck. So a little bit of immortality there, like something definitely taking over her. And that scene was fucking good. Like uncut, just the screams, the everything. So yeah, highly debatable though with Sydney's. They're both phenomenal though. So hats off to that.
Yeah, I mean, goddamn. And right after that, we have another similar type of thing here where she kind of blacks out. She blacks out like she did earlier in the film.
Yeah,
We wake up to Money, the cardinal, walking over to her. They're in some darkly lit room somewhere. You would probably have a ritual going on. Pretty creepy.
yeah,
People are in freaking robes or freaking whatever you want to call them, and they're all hooded. They all got black hoods, and it's just very creepy. Cardinal comes over to her explaining that she is special. And that's what we kind of talked about earlier, Money. And if you want to take this part, I'll allow you to.
yeah. So she's there. She's laying down. He's saying how brave she is, how special she is, how he's watched over her, and now it's time to put on her bravest face and have this child. And they subdue her up and numb her. Again, the scene's so fucking intense. The scalpel. They basically do a forced C-section. The doctor's hands in there pulling out the twins and popping the sack. Everything about it was just insane. And the first to come was a female, and the late a male, and they all celebrate.
It was crazy. Oh,
They
they were
all
all holding
celebrate.
their breaths. Everybody in the
I was holding
audience.
my breath in a lot of these scenes, these gory, just realistic scenes like that. It just no filter at all with it. And they were extremely obviously happy there was a boy. I think Father Brennan was saying earlier too, how the devil will need to mate with his own spawn. They needed a male in order to conceive the Antichrist. Like you said earlier before we hopped on, a little bit of incest shit going on. Some really vile, just evil, just at its core, just pure evil. So take that how you want it, but the jackal is finally getting what it wants. And Margaret kind of goes on a rampage here. She kills a couple people, and she does escape. And that kill to the cardinal is pretty damn intense too. It was foreshadowing it. I knew a death was gonna happen here. Like someone was gonna die, either one of the main sisters or nuns or the cardinal in it. So they end up lighting the place on fire. She escapes, and we see pretty damn good shot of the jackal through the flames. What'd you think of that?
That's the moment where I'm thinking, okay, is he actually real? Is
Right,
is the jackal in physical form in real
right.
life? And that's
I think
where
it
I'm
was there in that scene.
God, I think it was too. And
It
we
had to
really
be.
didn't see, we might have seen the claws here and there in the first half and a little bit of the second
Yeah,
half, but this is the moment where we really truly see it in its full form, almost human-esque from the
yep,
legs up. And then the top half is more the jackal form, the jackal head, of course. And I believe we have Carlita come in to save the day for
yeah.
Margaret, which
Kind
is
of, kind
really
of
cool to see.
shockingly.
Yeah, shocking. I didn't expect it. I definitely thought she was going down in flames potentially too. And she takes the twin, the other twin, the sister, the female, and they get out of Dodge. They're able to escape and pretty much live incognito for what we see to be
Yeah.
years, for sure. The
Yeah. It
ending,
was,
the ending satisfying. I think I kind of liked it. It was crazy, and like you said, I like that moment where I kind of know something's gonna happen. I think she's gonna try to take this into her own hands because she's kind of eyeing that scalpel on the side there as she's laying on the bed. You can kind of see it. She's like,
oh,
I'm waiting for
yeah.
my moment to fucking strike, and I'm doing this shit the moment I get it. So crazy stuff, and then lose the gal that went to the club with Margaret ends up actually kind of betraying her, and she is bought into this bullshit. She actually
Yep.
tries stabbing Margaret there at the end to no avail, no success. But my God, what a turn of events really for that character. Did not see that coming.
Yeah. They got her in their trap. And also another intense part of that too, we forgot to mention. Did you think she was gonna kill that child? Like she had a scalpel right to its head. She was holding the baby. I I'm like I was like she's gonna do it. Like watching it, I'm like she's gonna kill it because it would have ended it all. She wanted to hold her
Yep.
son. She convinced them to hold the cardinal, and that's when he died. She had it by the balls there, and like could have just ended it, but
Mm-hmm.
the sister grabs it. They kind of get in a scuffle. They escape. The fire happens, all that. But that was another intense part too, where she could have killed her own child, sacrificing it for the greater good, but she couldn't succumb to it. Obviously, as probably any mother would. But yes, so yeah, and in the end, like secluded, living up in the mountains, just a change of scenery. I freaking love that. I love that. And Father Brennan reunites with her one last time. Still don't know how he found them,
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure.
he told them that, the church is after her. She kind of, had him point blank with a shotgun, get the hell away. But she just wanted to be left the hell alone. But very I like that change of scenery. I like how that really ended. But
Yeah,
and the
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, and then the son being named Damien. So good ending, I think so. I honestly, I really didn't have any thoughts on the ending. I was just like, okay, like it's over. Like I'm just trying to process everything. So I was happy with it. Really, I was fine with it.
Yeah, I think it's a good ending overall. I don't think it's
Yeah,
exceptional by any means. It's a little
right.
crazy. It's hard to follow at times, but it was certainly entertaining. I was entertained.
Certainly,
If
certainly.
my jaw can be halfway dropped on the floor like it was for Immaculate, that is an indicator that it was a pretty effective ending, a good way to close.
Yeah,
I do like the tie-in there, and we can talk about that more openly now that we've kind of made our way through the film. But the tie-in to the original Omen with Damien being the child that is adopted by the U.S. ambassador, one of the main protagonists in the 1976 Omen film. They take in Damien thinking that he's a normal child. The wife from the original Omen had a miscarriage, and the husband, the ambassador, had a chance to take this child, Damien, adopt him, and kind of make it seem like to his wife that there was no miscarriage. Everything went fine. Here is our baby, but not actually their blood child, actually a jackal child. So I do like that
interesting.
tie-in, and it makes me want to watch the rest of the films. I don't know if I'd watch all of them, but I'd for sure want to try to watch the first one. And
Oh
I
yeah,
also want to say, Money, I did enjoy overall the score throughout the film was pretty decent. I like the ominous choir music. I'm a huge fan of that shit.
yeah,
I eat it up. I just wish it was used at better moments and placed more efficiently. But all in all,
yeah,
great to talk about.
yeah. I think it's time we get into our scores, Junes,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna read Rotten Tomatoes first, like we always usually try to do. You might be shocked, you might be surprised. We'll see. We'll see. I'm curious. I don't know. I will see what you think. But for an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for the first Omen, an audience score of 69%.
Oh,
So a critic score of 80%.
my
So
God.
so you seemed a little surprised, which I
What
thought you
was
will
what was
we'll
Immaculate?
I think in the
70, 60,
70s.
70 and 60, I think.
I think, yeah, roughly
Ooh,
in there. So these are I think the critic score on this might be a little higher.
think it
I
is.
can't remember if it's different. I don't know. It might. I think it is a little bit higher, but they're pretty damn similar. So, yeah, I thought you'd be a little surprised. So I'm curious to see how that plays with your score, Junes. So I can go first. You can go first. It don't matter. I think we might be kind of similar. We'll see. Um, for me, my score, it's I even said it to my brother. It's like, I walked out of the theater, and if I don't, if I'm really confused, if I'm, obviously if I watch the other movies, I wouldn't be as confused. But knowing this and what it did and everything, like I walked out very confused. And if I do that and I didn't really enjoy it, I'm not going to have that great of a score. And there's a lot to unpack. Yes, there were positives, the shots we see, the city of Rome, the protesters, some really damn good characters, obviously really intense scenes. I think another one we forgot to talk about was the one girl that hung herself on fire. Forgot to mention that, but that was another great scene. The pacing was all over the place. There was just things misplaced throughout this film that I really think didn't even need to be in there. I think this film was 2 hours long. I think it could have been an hour and a half easily if you got rid of some of the stuff. Yes, I get that this type of genre, you need those shots. You got to introduce everybody. You have all these sisters. We have it in Immaculate. It's going to be slow. You kind of know, with this genre, you almost know what you're getting into. It's very repetitive. But again, it's how they execute this. Immaculate was better for me. And I think that just this film really was just subpar with a lot of those things. Um, Great acting though. Great phenomenal acting. You know, the positives in this film really makes me want to dive a little bit deeper into this genre. It's like nudging me in the right direction in a positive way, not in a negative way from Immaculate, from this. Like they're decent films. Immaculate I thought was great. This was just an okay film, but it's leaning me and nudging me in the positive and right direction to try to get more into it for the future with new films and obviously anything in the past. Um, but the plot to this I did enjoy. They just really drew it out. They really twisted it. I can't imagine if you had to go take a piss in the theater and come back, what you'd miss and how off and misled you'd be because you'd come back and be like, what the hell did I miss? Like, and so much other shit would have happened. So like to me, that's just an example of how I felt, what was kind of going through my head with it. But with that all being said, my score for the first Omen is going to be a 5-2.
Oh,
So I don't know what that reaction means, Junes. I'm going to 5-2. Initial reaction was like a 4-7, 4-8, but I have to give credit to some of these characters, the acting, just the positives in this film. Like I think we just need to shed light on it. But a 5-2, I'm going to 5-2. It's something that I'm not gonna go back to rewatch anytime soon. If anything, I'm gonna rewatch the other movies in this franchise. So, and who knows? My score would be a hell of a lot better if I knew that, but I'm not trying to use that as an excuse or an anchor to just pin this movie down as a negative movie. There's just things in there where they certainly could have done better. So I'm going to 5-2.
money. Well said. There are many things that I agree with you on there. And I do think we're going to be different here. We're going to be different here. Never match the score. Maybe you never will. I got to say, there's no shortage here with the first element of originality and creativity. I think it's skillfully put together, although a little bit haphazard at times. Like I've said before, a lot of jumping around. Things feel a little bit misplaced, but the originality is there. The setting is phenomenal. They
Mm-hmm.
paid so much attention to that. You felt
Yes.
like the stakes were high. You felt like you were in Rome
Yes.
during these protests with the radicals, and you could feel the urgency, the sense of urgency that this sector of the church, I would say the second sector, the one that has, I would say, very evil intentions, but you can feel the sense of urgency at hand for these people. It really, to them, is a chance for the Antichrist to be put out to the world, for people to see and then to think to themselves, oh my God, we need to turn back to God. And I'm talking the whole population of humans to turn back to God. They wanted that. They felt that they were losing that grip, that hold on people. And it's so real today because the Catholic Church is at a very tough point. They've been at a tough point for years. The whole issues with priests that happened back in the early 2000s or late 2000s, that shit happened. Whether you want to ignore it or not is up to you. But that stuff did happen. So there are bad actors in the Catholic Church, which is very unfortunate because it's got a lot of good morals, of course. But we see those themes, I think, talked about perfectly here, and not too on the nose with it. I can appreciate that. Just give me a film that's
Mhm.
entertaining. I understand what you're getting at for a message, but as long as it's not too on the nose and not too repetitive, right in my face, that's fine with me. But like I said, the stakes, they felt so high. The urgency was so high as well, which is impactful for the viewer. It just is. We have some shocking moments, some really shocking moments. Sister Angelica, when she got burned on fire, was crazy to me. That's a crazy moment. But the issue with some of those is it is misplaced. Her character didn't matter. Why? I don't understand that. Why do that and not have it have a meaning?
Mhm.
Those were the things to me that were out of place and a little bit annoying to see. But my God, everything building up to the end, I think is perfect. I think the first half could have definitely been shortened down by at least 15 minutes. Honestly, it could
Yeah.
have been really. I think the cast came to play. I loved seeing Charles dance as Father Harris, who was in the first opening scene. He is a really good actor, so it's just kind of cool to see those little cameos. I can appreciate that. Ralph Ineson did a great job as Father Brennan. One other complaint I have is the dialogue at times was a little hard to hear. And as an audience, that kind of pisses me off a little bit because I want to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Bad dialogue does not help that. And maybe it's just Ralph Ineson's strong accent. That's fine. But there were other characters throughout the film that I'm like, what the hell? What they say? I can't understand that. But there's so many subtleties that are placed in the film, and the devil money is in the details. And if we look at the details, we come to learn more about this film. We read up on it. If you can get the audience to do that, give them just enough to kind of interpret the way they want, get them to go read up on it. Those are the films that have a lot of weight and a lot of impact. I kind of enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed it. You might
Mhm.
be surprised here. I enjoyed it more than Immaculate. I'm going a 7.1 for good reason. I think this was fun as hell to talk about. I think it's a great film to discuss, and we're quite a bit off, but overall,
Yeah.
I'm happy with my score. And like I said, 7.1.
And I can appreciate your score because I appreciate and I can see where you're coming from. So, um, yeah, that I mean, man, that just shows you how two minds can think alike but different at the same time and have different concepts and ideas of this genre and films within it. So, Junes, it's been a freaking blast. You know, doing this with you all the time is so fun, and especially when a new movie comes out, there's nothing better.
It's the love of my life, and it is for a lot of other people. So it's been a great one, number 23, and I'm looking forward to number 24. We're on a horror movie conquest, baby.
Yep. Stay tuned, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to check us out on all those platforms we mentioned earlier. We hope you guys have a great day. Thank you again for tuning in. This has been Scratching the Surface.